A black woman was harassed by an airline attendant, but no one knew she was the CEO's wife. "Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to step aside." The flight attendant's voice was crisp, just loud enough for the passengers behind her to hear. She wore a smile so fake it cracked at the edges. The black woman in the first-class line blinked slowly, her expression unreadable. "You've been randomly selected for a security recheck," the attendant added, though her eyes said something else entirely. Naomi Clark didn't argue. She didn't roll her eyes or ask why she, out of the 10 people in the boarding lane, was the only one singled out. She simply picked up her designer handbag, stepped out of line, and followed the woman toward the gate desk, her heels clicking like slow applause against the polished floor. No one knew who she was. Not the flight attendant. Not the gate agent who barely looked up. Not the passengers staring over their shoulders. To them, Naomi Clark was just another black woman in expensive clothes, probably flying on someone else's dime, possibly suspicious, certainly out of place. But Naomi wasn't out of place. She was exactly where she was supposed to be. And she had a plan. It began 3 weeks earlier, in a Manhattan penthouse with floor-to-ceiling windows and a view of the city most people would never afford to imagine. Naomi had been married to Marcus Clark for 5 years, long enough to know when something was wrong. He was the CEO of Altavia Airlines, a legacy carrier struggling to modernize its brand and repair a reputation marred by quiet scandals and louder rumors. And lately, he'd been quiet. Too quiet. "You're pulling away again," Naomi said that night, her voice gentle but firm as she poured them both glasses of red wine. Marcus sighed. "It's this whistleblower thing," he admitted. "Someone's filed a complaint, alleging racial bias, staff discrimination. We're getting audited." Naomi sipped her wine. "Is it true?" He looked at her. "You tell me. You've flown more than half our routes in the past year." She had, as a secret shopper, unofficially. Naomi had insisted on it early in their marriage, said she needed to know the company she was indirectly representing. She never flew under her married name, never called in favors, and she always paid attention. That night, Marcus told her the details. The complaint had come from an anonymous employee. It referenced patterns. Black passengers routinely marked for secondary checks. Hispanic travelers asked for proof of return tickets. A disproportionate number of white passengers upgraded to first class at the gate. There were spreadsheets, names, numbers. "Do you want me to look into it?" she asked. He hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, but not as my wife. As yourself." And so she did. Naomi booked a flight from LaGuardia to Denver under her maiden name, Naomi Ellis. She flew coach. Then again to Miami, this time in business class. Then again to Seattle, deliberately dressed down in sneakers and a hoodie. On each trip, she took notes, recorded interactions, marked who got flagged, who got smiles, who got pulled aside for random checks, and the patterns were there. Still, nothing compared to what happened on Flight 228 to Los Angeles. She arrived early, dressed in a sleek cream-colored pantsuit, her hair in a low twist, sunglasses perched on her head. She looked polished, professional, and unmistakably black. The moment she entered the priority lane, she felt it. The shift. The microsecond delay before the agent scanned her ticket. The way the woman behind her was waved through without a glance. The attendant standing at the boarding door stiffened when she approached. "Boarding pass and ID," she said. Naomi handed them over. The woman squinted at the ID. "This doesn't match the reservation." Naomi blinked. "Yes, it does. Your ID says Naomi Clark." Naomi smiled politely. "My legal name. The reservation is under Naomi Ellis. Ellis is my maiden name. It's listed on the back of the ID." She turned it over. "See?" The woman frowned. "I'll have to check with a supervisor." Naomi didn't flinch. "Of course." 5 minutes passed. 10. Other passengers stared. Some smirked. Naomi kept her posture straight. Her silence wasn't submission, it was strategy. Finally, a gate supervisor arrived, reviewed the ID, the ticket, the match. "She's fine," he said. "Let her board." But it didn't end there. Once on board, Naomi found her seat 1A, first class, and began placing her bag in the overhead compartment. That's when the same attendant reappeared. "Ma'am, You'll need to check that bag. It fits, Naomi said calmly. The attendant pursed her lips. We've had complaints about large bags in the first-class cabin. Naomi looked around. Several other passengers were placing similar-sized bags overhead. None of them were being stopped. Who complained? Naomi asked. I don't have to disclose that, the woman snapped. Naomi stepped back. Go ahead. Tag it. The attendant seemed surprised. But she did, and walked off. The man across the aisle leaned toward Naomi. That was uncomfortable, he said. You handled that well. Naomi smiled faintly. You'd be surprised how much practice I've had. By the time the plane landed in Los Angeles, Naomi had enough footage, notes, and first-hand experience to know two things. One, the complaint her husband received wasn't an exaggeration. And two, the problem wasn't isolated. It was systemic. Trained. Practiced. She went back to New York and began drafting her report. But she didn't give it to Marcus right away. Instead, she made one more booking. This time, she used her full legal name. She booked first class, direct from JFK to Dallas, a company's internal training hub. She knew the likelihood of being recognized was higher. But that was the point. She needed someone to recognize her. And they didn't. Not at check-in. Not at security. Not at the gate. Which is how Naomi Clark, wife of the CEO, ended up being pulled aside by a flight attendant named Rachel Trent for behavioral screening because she didn't smile when spoken to. That's what the attendant said. She looked agitated. Rachel explained to the supervisor when asked. Didn't make eye contact. Seemed evasive. The gate supervisor glanced at Naomi's boarding pass. Ma'am, is there a problem? Naomi looked at him. Not with me. Rachel flinched. I was just following protocol. Which protocol? Naomi asked. The one where black women are suspicious unless they're grinning like pageant queens? Or the one where you make up policies as you go? A silence fell. The supervisor's brow furrowed. I'd like to board now, Naomi said. And this time, she did. What none of them knew was that she'd already set the wheels in motion. That every incident, every recorded exchange, every note from the last 3 weeks was compiled in a report now sitting on Marcus Clark's desk. Along with the videos. Along with the names. It wasn't just about Rachel. It wasn't just about Naomi. It was about every woman, every man, every child who had ever been made to feel like a threat because of their skin. That was Act 1. Act 2 would begin the next morning. Because by then, the story had already leaked. The media firestorm ignited before breakfast. A junior employee from Altavia's communications team had seen the footage first. A friend of Naomi's had shared it privately with the subject line, "Time to wake them up." By 6:42 a.m., it was in the inboxes of 3 editors at major outlets. By 7:10, it was on the homepage of 2. By 7:30, Naomi's name was trending. Not her maiden name, not her seat number, her full legal name, attached to headlines like CEO's wife harassed mid-flight, and airline faces backlash after racist treatment of black woman who happens to be the boss's spouse. At 8:05 a.m., Marcus Clark called her. You leaked it, he said. No, Naomi replied. I gave it to someone who needed it. What they did with it was their choice. There was silence. Then, you're going to destroy this company. No, she said quietly. I'm going to rebuild it. But this time on truth. The backlash was immediate and brutal. Thousands of comments flooded Altavia's social pages. Shareholders demanded explanations. Employees who'd stayed silent now spoke up. One by one, testimonies emerged from both staff and passengers, painting a picture that no amount of PR spin could blur. Rachel Trent was placed on immediate leave. An internal investigation launched within hours. But the issue, Naomi knew, wasn't one woman. It was the structure. So she made a list. Within 48 hours, Altavia announced a new initiative. Public. Transparent. It included a third-party equity audit, the resignation of 2 board members, a revamped training protocol for all customer-facing employees, and the creation of a passenger advocacy council. And, at the center of it all, Naomi Clark, newly appointed to the board as Chief Ethics Officer. The decision shocked many. Marcus Clark included. You're serious about this? He asked in their kitchen that night. Naomi looked up from her notes. I didn't come this far to be quiet. He poured her a glass of wine. Do you hate me? She took it thoughtfully. I don't hate you, but I don't excuse you either. You knew something was wrong, and you let it rot in silence. He nodded slowly. Then help me fix it. She did. In the months that followed, Altavia became a model for accountability in corporate air travel. Not perfect, but progressing. Passengers of color began sharing better experiences. Staff diversity increased. Flight attendants were retrained, not just in service, but in empathy. And yet, the most powerful shift wasn't on board. It was in perception. People began to see Naomi Clark differently, not just as a CEO's wife, not just as a well-dressed passenger, but as someone who refused to let silence excuse injustice. 1 year after the incident, she was invited to give a keynote at a national conference on equity in business. She walked onto the stage to a standing ovation, and as she adjusted the mic, she smiled. A flight attendant once told me I looked suspicious because I didn't smile when spoken to. So today, I want to begin by saying this. She paused, looked across the crowd. Black women don't owe you a smile. We owe you the truth. Applause roared. And in that moment, the silence finally broke. The headlines didn't just spread, they detonated. CEO's wife mistreated on flight by own airline. Black woman called ma'am in mocking tone turns out to be the boss's wife. Every major outlet picked it up. CNN, MSNBC, even the morning talk shows. By Tuesday, it had gone international. The story was no longer about an unruly flight attendant. It had become a parable about power, identity, and all the things America still refused to look in the eye. No one was more stunned than Tanya. When her suspension turned into a full-blown investigation, she tried to spin it. She claimed she was having a bad day, said the woman Rebecca had been vague, distant, and aggressive. But the recording of her tone-sharp, dismissive, layered with sarcastic sweetness was now public. The audio of her saying, "People like you always make scenes," was dissected by linguists and civil rights activists alike. Tanya had grown, used to being untouchable. Seniority had made her careless. But now, everything was collapsing. Her coworkers stopped replying to her texts. Her union issued a lukewarm statement. And then came the letter, termination, effective immediately. But the story didn't end there. Because Rebecca never wanted revenge. She wanted the mirror to stay up. The airline released a public apology. Sure, but that wasn't enough. Rebecca's husband, David Langston, the elusive CEO who rarely showed his face in the media, scheduled a press conference. And for the first time in company history, he stood on stage not alone but beside his wife. It was broadcast live. David wore a plain navy suit, no tie. Rebecca wore the same white blouse she had been traveling in the day. Tanya mocked her, except this time it was pressed, crisp, almost defiant. "My name is David Langston," he began, "and this is my wife, Rebecca. She has stood beside me through every merger, every acquisition, every overnight flight that kept me from our children. What happened to her on Flight 227 wasn't just unprofessional. It was a reflection of something we have allowed to live too long inside this company and this country." He paused. Rebecca stepped forward. "I didn't speak that day," she said calmly, her voice clear. "I didn't speak because I wanted to see how far someone would go when they believed I was powerless. I let myself be overlooked, mocked, humiliated, not because I lacked pride, but because I knew pride wouldn't change hearts. Evidence would." The cameras flashed. Silence hung like smoke. "I could have pulled rank," she added. "I could have said, 'Do you know who I am?' But the point is, should I have to? Why should any woman, any person of color, have to wear a title like armor just to be treated with decency?" The moment was electric. The next day, the airline announced sweeping reforms. Anti-bias training wasn't just updated, it was rewritten from the ground up, co-designed by a task force that included psychologists, former flight crew members, and racial equity consultants. Rebecca herself was named head of a new division, Equity in the Skies. Its mission was simply no passenger or employee would go unheard again. But that wasn't what made headlines. What made headlines was what happened in the employee town hall the following week. It was held in a hangar, one usually reserved for maintenance. Rows of foldable chairs lined up beneath jet engines and blinking lights. Hundreds of employees attended. Mechanics, stewards, pilots, desk agents. And Rebecca stood in front of them not as a victim, but as a catalyst. She didn't come to scold. She came to ask questions. How many of you, she said, have seen something unfair, heard something wrong, and stayed quiet? Hands went up, slowly, then all at once. She nodded. I'm not here to shame you. I'm here to shame too. That's when something shifted. One by one, people began to share. A baggage handler described how a supervisor mocked his accent. A junior flight attendant admitted to laughing at a racist joke because she didn't want to seem sensitive. A veteran pilot said he once reported an incident, only to be told to let it go. Rebecca didn't interrupt. She listened. She took notes. And when it was over, she made a promise. This isn't a one-time healing circle, she said. This is the beginning of accountabilities, but also community. We're not going to tear down a system. We're going to rewire it. 2 months passed. The story faded from the headlines, replaced by new scandals, new distractions. But inside the company, something real was happening. Rebecca launched anonymous feedback platforms for employees. She created emergency reporting hotlines not run by HR, but by third-party monitors. The diversity team, once symbolic, was now operational and had budget authority. And Tanya? She faded too. She filed a wrongful termination suit, but it didn't get far. Not with the evidence, not with the wave of former co-workers who came forward, sharing how she belittled them, berated gate agents, and once told a Nigerian customer to speak English or don't fly. Her reputation was done. But this wasn't a story about her. This was about something bigger. Because months later, Rebecca received a letter. Handwritten, sloppy cursive, no return address. It read, I was on that flight. I didn't say anything. I sat 3 rows back and watched you be treated like dirt and told myself it wasn't my problem. I want you to know I think about it every day. And I'm sorry. You didn't know me, but you made me see myself. Thank you. Rebecca folded the letter carefully, slid it into a drawer where she kept mementos. Not because it healed the moment, but because it proved the moment had echoed. That was what she cared about most. Not revenge, reflection, reckoning, and change. Weeks later, at a conference in Seattle, she gave a keynote. It wasn't supposed to be personal, but near the end, she let herself say something unscripted. I'm not the first Black woman to be disrespected in silence, she said, and I won't be the last. But every time someone stays silent, less even once, then we're moving forward. The room gave her a standing ovation. Not because she was the CEO's wife, but because she had stood for something when no one expected her to stand at all. Back home, David met her at the airport. No car service, no cameras, just him, holding a bouquet from the grocery store and a thermos of her favorite tea. Ready to be regular again? He asked with a smile. She looked around. The same gates, the same uniforms, the same world, but slightly shifted. I was never trying to be anything else, she said. I just didn't want to be invisible. And she wasn't. Not anymore. Because from that day on, in that airline inn slowly, in others, Rebecca's name didn't mean scandal. It meant standard. It meant dignity. It meant a Black woman had been seen, had been believed, and had helped reshape the sky itself.